The Texas evening stretched wide and endless, painted with streaks of burnt orange fading into indigo. On the edge of town, far from the rows of identical suburban houses, stood a weathered ranch. Its wooden beams leaned with age. Its barn bore the scars of storms long past, yet it radiated a kind of quiet defiance. This was the Carter Ranch, 150 years old, older than the county courthouse, older than the town itself. Ezekiel Carter, known to neighbors as Grandpa Zeke, sat on the porch, his calloused hands resting on a cane carved from oak. At 78, his back had grown heavy with time, but his eyes were sharp, steady, unyielding. Every plank of the house, every fence post in the field, was a testament to his family's endurance. His grandfather had built this place brick by brick after the Civil War, and each generation since had added to it. For Zeke, the ranch was not simply land. It was memory and blood, sacrifice and survival. Yet the world around him no longer moved at the ranch's slow, patient pace. Across the rolling hills, rows of pristine two-story homes had sprouted like weeds. Identical siding, identical lawns, identical rules. With them came a new power in town, the Homeowners Association. Its board members carried clipboards and polite smiles, speaking of standards and community cohesion. To them, the Carter Ranch was an eyesore, a stubborn relic that didn't fit their polished vision. The conflict began quietly. A letter appeared in Zeke's mailbox, typed in formal language, informing him that his property was in violation of community appearance guidelines. Zeke read it once, then folded it neatly and tossed it into the fire. He had lived on this land longer than the HOA had existed, and no neighborhood club could dictate his rights. But the letters kept coming, each more insistent, each more threatening. His granddaughter Maya, freshly home from college, read one aloud on a late afternoon. Her voice trembled with anger. "They're calling the barn structurally hazardous and the fencing non-compliant. Grandpa, they're demanding you tear it down or pay fines." Zeke said nothing for a long moment, only watching the horizon where the sun dipped below the hills. At last, his voice came low and firm. This land was bought fair and free. It's protected by deeds older than half the houses they live in. They can send all the letters they want. This ranch isn't going anywhere. Maya's eyes burned with the same stubborn fire that ran in her grandfather's veins. Then they're not just coming after wood and nails. They're coming after us. And we can't let them win. The next week, Zeke found 3 men in suits standing at the edge of his property. Their smiles were rehearsed, their tone clipped. They spoke of progress, of bringing the neighborhood up to standard. They suggested, politely, that selling would be in everyone's best interest. Zeke's reply was simple. "This house has stood through wars, droughts, and men stronger than you. It'll outlast this, too." He turned his back on them, but the message was clear. They would not stop. What began as letters became fines. What began as polite requests became demands. Anonymous phone calls arrived late at night. Pickup trucks parked near his driveway, engines idling, headlights casting long shadows across the ranch. It was intimidation, plain and simple. Still, Zeke remained unmoved. To him, the harassment was not new. He had lived through times when his rights had been questioned simply because of who he was. Now, decades later, he recognized the same arrogance cloaked in new language. One evening, Maya scrolled through her phone, her fingers tight around the device. "Grandpa, people online are talking about HOAs all over the country doing this. Families losing homes, history erased for the sake of property values. We can't just sit back. We need to fight publicly." Zeke's gaze stayed on the ranch. The boards creaked, the roof sagged, but the house still stood strong. His voice was slow, deliberate. "You want to fight? Then make sure the world sees who's swinging first. Don't let them bury us quiet." Maya nodded, already planning to document every step, every threat. But even as she prepared, the HOA escalated. A final letter arrived, this time stamped with bold red ink. It claimed the Carter Ranch was scheduled for demolition within weeks unless corrective measures were taken. Zeke stared at the page, his jaw tightening. It was no longer a bluff. They were coming. He folded the letter carefully and set it on the table. His hand lingered on it for a moment, then he looked to Maya. They think this land belongs to them now. They're about to learn it doesn't. The ranch sat silent in the dusk, the weight of history pressing heavy on its beams. A storm was gathering, and Grandpa Zeke knew it was headed straight for his doorstep. The morning after the final letter arrived, the Carter Ranch no longer felt like a home but a fortress waiting under siege. Zeke rose early, as he always had, yet there was no peace in feeding the horses or mending fences. His every move was shadowed by the knowledge that strangers believed they had the right to erase his family's legacy. That week, the HOA abandoned civility. 3 men arrived again, this time with a folder thick with paperwork. Their leader, a tall man with a sharp smile and slicked hair, introduced himself as Gregory Shaw, the HOA president. He carried himself with the certainty of someone accustomed to winning. "Mr. Carter," Shaw began, his tone rehearsed, "this property has been officially deemed non-compliant with community safety codes. If you do not comply voluntarily, demolition will proceed at your expense." Zeke leaned on his cane, unflinching. "You're trespassing. This land predates your codes by over a century. I've got the deeds to prove it." Shaw's smile never faltered, but his eyes narrowed. "Deeds are paper. Progress is permanent. You'll find resistance costly." Zeke turned his back on them and shut the door. It was an old door, heavy oak, the kind that creaked with history. And in that small act, he declared his refusal to be intimidated. But shutting the door did not shut out the war. Fines began arriving in the mailbox, each demand steeper than the last. First $500, then $5,000, then an impossible $30,000, all for violations Zeke knew were fabricated. Maya kept every letter, scanning them into her laptop. She posted the documents online with captions sharp enough to cut. "They want to bulldoze history to build cookie-cutter homes. This isn't about safety, it's about power." The post spread quickly, shared by strangers outraged that a man could lose his ancestral ranch to the will of a neighborhood board. Support poured in from across the country, but so did hostility. Anonymous accounts flooded Maya's inbox with threats. Some messages even named the ranch directly. "Leave before we make you leave." At night, Zeke noticed unfamiliar trucks parked near the property line, their headlights glowing like watchful eyes. Engines idled, low and menacing, before peeling away into the dark. It was intimidation, calculated and relentless. Still, Zeke's resolve did not crack. Over supper, Maya pressed him. "Grandpa, they're escalating. They're trying to break you down piece by piece. What if they don't stop at fines?" Zeke's gaze fixed on her. His voice was quiet, yet heavy with certainty. "Then they'll learn I don't break. Not for threats. Not for men in suits. This land has seen worse than them." Maya felt the weight of his words, but also the danger behind them. She filmed him that night, sitting on the porch as the crickets sang. His silhouette against the fading sky carried an undeniable dignity. She uploaded the video with the caption, "They want to erase him, but this is what history looks like." By morning, the video had gone viral. Thousands commented, calling Zeke a symbol of resistance. But the attention only enraged the HOA further. 2 days later, Zeke was jolted awake by the low growl of engines. He stepped outside to see a convoy of heavy machinery lined at the edge of his property, bulldozers and excavators, their steel arms gleaming under the sun. A fleet of contractors stood beside them, helmets strapped on, clipboards in hand. And there, at the center, was Gregory Shaw. His polished shoes pressed into the Carter soil as though he already owned it. A folded paper waved in his hand. "Mr. Carter," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard, "this is your final notice. By order of the HOA, demolition begins today." Maya rushed out with her phone raised, recording every moment. Her voice shook with fury. "You can't do this. You don't have legal authority. This is his land." Shaw smirked, holding the paper higher. "We have authority enough. Step aside, or you'll be removed for obstruction." The contractors shifted, waiting for the command. Engines roared louder, drowning out the quiet morning. Dust rose where the machines inched forward, their shadows stretching across the ranch yard. Zeke stood at the porch, cane in one hand, shotgun cradled in the other. He did not raise it, but its presence was declaration enough. His voice rolled like thunder. You set one wheel on this land, and you'll regret it. This ranch is protected. This house is my family. You don't touch it. Not today, not ever. The workers hesitated, unsure. Maya's camera captured every breath of the standoff, the suited president sneering, the old man unmoving, the machines growling at the edge of action. Then Zeke did something that froze even Gregory Shaw's smile. He pulled a small phone from his pocket and began dialing. His words carried over the growl of the bulldozers. You think you've cornered me, but you don't even know whose land you're standing on. The call connected. Zeke's tone shifted, calm but commanding. This is Carter Ranch. They're here. Send them in. The contractors looked at one another uneasily. Shaw's expression flickered with doubt for the first time, and Maya, still filming, whispered in disbelief. Grandpa, who did you just call? The bulldozers idled like beasts straining against their chains. Gregory Shaw stood with his arms folded, his smirk sharpened by the rising dust. Contractors waited for his signal, their machines groaning as if eager to rip into the Carter Ranch. Then the sound of engines approached from the opposite direction. Not the guttural growl of construction equipment, but the low, commanding hum of government vehicles. Black SUVs swept up the dirt road, tires grinding gravel, windows tinted like mirrors. They halted in a precise formation at the edge of the ranch. Doors opened in unison. Men in dark suits stepped out, their movements crisp and deliberate. Their presence silenced the contractors, who instinctively shifted back from their machines. A tall officer, his sunglasses reflecting the morning glare, strode forward with a badge in his hand. Federal Protective Service, he announced, his voice clipped but carrying. This property is listed under the Federal Historic Preservation Act. Any attempt to alter or demolish it without congressional approval is a violation of federal law. The words hit the air like thunder. Shaw blinked, his smirk faltering. This is a private community matter. Your presence here is unnecessary. The officer did not blink. What's unnecessary is your harassment of a protected site. We've reviewed records. This land has been federally documented since 1870. Your orders carry no weight. Maya's phone trembled in her grip as she recorded every second. She had seen her grandfather stand defiant against the HOA, but this was history defending itself. Shaw tried to recover his composure. He stepped closer, his voice rising with indignation. Do you know who we are? We run this community. We decide the standards. The officer's tone turned iron. You run a subdivision, Mr. Shaw. That's all. You do not run federal property. And you will not bulldoze a man's home to inflate your property values. A murmur swept through the contractors. The authority in the officer's voice carried weight, heavier than Shaw's bluster. Machines fell silent as operators pulled their hands off the controls. The standoff had shifted. Shaw's jaw tightened. We have legal grounds. You have no grounds, the officer interrupted, pulling a folder from under his arm. He flipped it open, pages stamped and sealed. What you have are falsified citations, fraudulent fines, and a pattern of harassment documented in both local and federal complaints. Effective immediately, your association is under investigation. Gasps rippled among the onlookers. Neighbors had gathered quietly along the edge of the road, peering from behind fences, drawn by the commotion. They watched as Shaw's authority unraveled. Zeke stood tall on his porch, his shotgun resting against the rail. His voice carried steady and deep. Told you this land wasn't yours to take. For the first time, Shaw's polished composure cracked. Sweat beaded at his temple. He gestured wildly toward the contractors. Don't just stand there. Start the demolition. But no one moved. The federal officer turned toward the workers. Any operator who proceeds will be in violation of federal law. That's a felony. You'll lose more than a paycheck. You'll lose your freedom. The contractors exchanged glances, then slowly powered down their machines. Engines sputtered into silence. Dust settled. Maya captured it all. The retreat of the bulldozers, the uncertainty spreading across Shaw's face, the authority of law eclipsing the arrogance of power. She whispered to her grandfather, "They're backing down. We're winning." But Zeke did not smile. His gaze was steady, his expression unreadable. Winning battles doesn't mean the war's over. The officer approached the porch and extended a hand. "Mr. Carter, you won't face this alone anymore. We're launching a full investigation into the HOA. Their intimidation, their misuse of funds, their overreach, it ends here." Zeke clasped the man's hand, his grip firm despite the years in his bones. "Appreciate that. Long time coming." The officer nodded, then turned to address the watching neighbors. "This isn't just about one ranch. This is about abuse of power. And it stops today." The crowd stirred. Some nodded, some whispered, some recorded on their phones. For years they had tolerated the HOA's dominance, fearful of fines or retaliation. But seeing them checked by federal authority cracked something open, a realization that maybe, just maybe, the HOA was not untouchable. Shaw, red-faced and desperate, barked at his board members to follow him. They shuffled after him, their suits dusty, their authority hollow. As they retreated, Zeke's voice cut through the stillness. "This ranch has outlived men like you before. It'll outlive you too." The words struck like a verdict. The sun climbed higher, casting light over the Carter Ranch, untouched and resolute. But beneath the calm lay new currents, federal investigators sifting through years of documents, neighbors whispering about corruption, and Shaw plotting his next move, unwilling to accept defeat. Maya lowered her phone, her heart racing. "Grandpa, this isn't just our fight anymore. The whole town's watching." Zeke settled back into his chair, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Good. Let them. Because the fight isn't over yet." The days that followed the standoff felt different in the neighborhood. Where silence and fear had once reigned, whispers now stirred in kitchens, garages, and driveways. Neighbors who had watched quietly from behind curtains began speaking aloud about the HOA. Stories surfaced of unfair fines, of bullying letters, of money disappearing from association accounts. The federal investigators wasted no time. Black sedans returned, not for Zeke's ranch, but for the homes of board members. Boxes of files were carried out, laptops confiscated, subpoenas delivered. Each step peeled back another layer of corruption. Gregory Shaw, once the untouchable voice of community order, suddenly looked small. His sharp suits no longer shielded him from scrutiny. Reporters crowded his driveway. Cameras followed him to court. Charges of fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of authority stacked like bricks on his back. Maya documented it all, her phone never far from her hand. She uploaded clips of investigators, neighbors testifying, and Shaw's furious denials. Each post spread faster than the last. People weren't just following the story, they were rallying around it. In one video, Maya stood in front of the ranch's weathered barn, speaking directly to the lens. "This land isn't just our home. It's a reminder that history can't be erased for convenience. The HOA tried to silence us, but now the world sees the truth." The video went viral. Messages flooded in, some from families who had suffered similar fates, others from strangers inspired by Zeke's stand. Donations arrived, enough to repair the ranch and preserve it for generations to come. Still, Zeke himself remained quiet. He rarely left the porch, watching events unfold with the same steady gaze he had carried through every hardship in his life. For him, victory was not about headlines or virality. It was about survival, holding on to the one thing his family had entrusted him to protect. One evening, Maya sat beside him as cicadas buzzed in the humid dusk. "Grandpa, you've become a symbol. People see you as proof that ordinary folks can stand against power and win." Zeke's eyes remained on the horizon. Symbols come and go. What matters is the land. As long as it stands, so do we. The trial of Gregory Shaw drew national coverage. Former board members testified against him, to save themselves. Records revealed years of siphoned funds and deliberate intimidation of homeowners. The very tactics used against Zeke had been practiced on others, hidden under layers of bureaucracy. When the verdict finally came, guilty on multiple counts, the courtroom buzzed with satisfaction. Shaw's face hardened, but there was no smirk left to wear. He was sentenced to prison, his empire of rules reduced to rubble. The HOA dissolved under federal order, its power stripped and scattered. Neighbors once cowed by Shaw's authority walked freely now. Some came to the Carter Ranch to apologize, admitting they had been too afraid to speak. Zeke listened, nodding slowly, though he asked for nothing in return. "Fear's a strong chain," he told one man. "But chains break when enough hands pull." The ranch itself became more than a home. Preservationists reached out, offering to help restore its historic structures. Schools asked if students could visit to learn about its history and the man who fought to protect it. For Maya, it was a beginning. She launched a platform dedicated to telling similar stories: families versus unjust systems, ordinary people against unchecked power. She knew the fight was larger than one ranch, and she intended to carry it forward. But for Zeke, the fight was finished. One night, as the stars burned sharp against the Texas sky, he leaned back in his chair, cane resting against his leg. The porch creaked beneath his weight. Maya looked over, expecting words, but he only smiled faintly. The silence was enough. The ranch was safe. His ancestors' voices seemed to whisper through the tall grass, echoing what he had always known: some legacies are too strong to be erased. Weeks later, a new sign stood at the edge of the property. It bore bold letters: Carter Ranch, a historic landmark, protected forever. Visitors stopped to take photos. Children ran across the open fields. The land that had nearly been stolen now belonged not just to one family, but to memory itself. As Maya filmed the sign for another video, her voice carried steady with pride. They stormed in to demolish this ranch. But instead, they built a reminder. You don't erase history. You don't erase family. You don't erase what's stronger than fear. Behind her, Zeke sat quietly on the porch, a silhouette against the sinking sun. The ranch stood tall, the storm past, the legacy unbroken. And though the battle was won, the story was far from over, because others somewhere else were still waiting for their chance to fight.